The moment Detective Olivia Reeves opened her grandfather's dusty case file, the impossible stared back at her. A murder from half a century ago mirrored the fresh corpse on her desk, down to the last chilling detail. The musty scent of old paper and dust filled the air as Olivia Reeves carefully opened the weathered cardboard box. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted out a stack of yellowed case files, their edges frayed and corners dog-eared from years of neglect. The oppressive silence of the police archives was broken only by the distant wail of sirens from the bustling city outside. Olivia's fingers traced the faded lettering on the top folder. Case number 741103. Unsolved. Her grandfather's neat handwriting adorned the cover, a bittersweet reminder of the legacy she now carried. Detective James Reeves had been a pillar of the Oakwood Police Department for over 4 decades. His integrity and dedication to justice legendary among his peers. Now, barely a week after his funeral, Olivia found herself delving into the cases that had consumed his life, searching for what exactly. As she opened the file, a black and white photograph slipped out, landing face up on the dusty floor. Olivia bent to retrieve it, her breath catching as she studied the image. A young woman, no older than Olivia herself, lay sprawled in an alleyway, her unseeing eyes staring up at the camera. The stark brutality of the scene sent a chill down Olivia's spine. "You okay in there, Reeves?" The gruff voice of Detective Marcus Torres echoed through the archives, startling Olivia from her reverie. "Yeah, I'm fine," she called back, hastily tucking the photograph back into the file. "Just taking a trip down memory lane, I guess." Marcus appeared in the doorway, his salt and pepper hair and weathered face a testament to his years on the force. He'd been her grandfather's partner in the later years and now served as Olivia's reluctant mentor. His dark eyes narrowed as he took in the scene before him. "Your grandfather's old cases, huh?" He stepped into the room, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his rumpled suit. "You sure you want to go digging through all that ancient history?" Olivia squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze defiantly. "These aren't just old cases, Marcus. They're people whose stories were never finished, families who never got closure. If there's even a chance we can solve one of these." Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off. "I get it, kid. I do. But you've got to understand, some of these cases, they're cold for a reason. Your grandfather was one of the best detectives this city's ever seen. If he couldn't crack them, maybe he just didn't have the resources we do now." Olivia countered, her voice tinged with a hint of desperation. "DNA analysis, advanced forensics, digital records. We owe it to the victims to at least try." A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the distant hum of the building's ancient air conditioning system. Finally, Marcus sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "All right, Reeves, you want to take a swing at these cold cases? Be my guest, but don't let it interfere with your current caseload. Got it?" "Chief Hawkins is already riding my ass about our clearance rates." Olivia nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Thanks, Marcus. I won't let you down." As Marcus turned to leave, Olivia's attention was drawn back to the photograph peeking out from the case file. Something about the image nagged at her, a sense of familiarity she couldn't quite place. She made a mental note to dig deeper into that particular case later. For now, though, duty called. Olivia carefully repacked the box of cold cases, her mind already racing with possibilities. As she left the archives, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the precipice of something big, something that would change her life and perhaps the entire city of Oakwood forever. The bustling energy of the Oakwood Police Department's bullpen hit Olivia like a wave as she emerged from the archives. Phones rang incessantly. Detectives hunched over their desks, poring over case files, and the ever-present aroma of stale coffee permeated the air. It was a far cry from the hushed, dusty atmosphere she'd just left behind. "Reeves!" The sharp voice of Chief Diana Hawkins cut through the chaos. "My office, now." Olivia exchanged a quick glance with Marcus, who merely shrugged and mouthed, "Good luck," steeling herself. She made her way to the chief's office, rapping lightly on the open door before entering. Chief Hawkins was a formidable presence, her steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, sharp eyes scrutinizing Olivia over the rim of her reading glasses. "Close the door," she instructed, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. As Olivia settled into the seat, Chief Hawkins leaned back, fingers steepled beneath her chin. "I understand you've been spending some time in the archives," she began, her tone neutral. Olivia nodded, fighting to keep her expression composed. "Yes, ma'am. I've been reviewing some of my grandfather's old cases. I thought there might be something we could." "Your grandfather was an exceptional detective," Chief Hawkins interrupted, her gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "One of the finest this department has ever seen. But those cases are closed for a reason, Detective Reeves." "With all due respect, Chief," Olivia countered, leaning forward slightly. "Just because a case is cold doesn't mean it's unsolvable. We have resources now that weren't available back then. If there's even a chance we could bring closure to some of these families." Chief Hawkins held up a hand, silencing her. "I admire your dedication, Reeves. It's clear you've inherited your grandfather's passion for justice. But I need you focused on the here and now. We've got a city to protect, current cases that need solving." Olivia opened her mouth to argue further, but the chief's stern look made her think better of it. Instead, she simply nodded. "Understood, ma'am." As she stood to leave, Chief Hawkins' voice stopped her. "Olivia." The use of her first name made her turn back, surprised. "Your grandfather was more than just a colleague to me. He was a mentor, a friend. I know how much his legacy means to you. Just be careful digging into the past. Sometimes, what we find isn't what we expect." The cryptic warning sent a chill down Olivia's spine, but she managed a small smile. "I'll keep that in mind, Chief. Thank you." As Olivia left the office, her mind raced with questions. What did Chief Hawkins mean? What was she afraid Olivia might find? The warning only strengthened her resolve to dig deeper into her grandfather's old cases. Lost in thought, she nearly collided with a whirlwind of energy barreling down the hallway. "Whoa, watch it," Detective distracted. Olivia looked up to find herself face to face with her best friend, Sophia Chun. The petite journalist's eyes sparkled with mischief behind her thick-rimmed glasses. A notepad clutched in one hand and a takeout coffee cup in the other. "Sorry, Soph," Olivia apologized, running a hand through her dark curls. "Got a lot on my mind." Sophia's expression softened, concern replacing her usual playful demeanor. "Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Olivia hesitated, glancing around the busy hallway. "Not here," she said quietly. "Meet me at O'Malley's after my shift? Around 8. Sophia nodded, her reporter's instincts clearly piqued. "Ooh, mysterious." "I'm intrigued." "It's a date, Detective." As Sophia bounced away, no doubt in pursuit of her next big story, Olivia couldn't help but smile. She and Sophia had been inseparable since college, their shared passion for uncovering the truth bonding them despite their different career paths. If anyone could help her make sense of the conflicting emotions swirling inside her, it was Sophia. The rest of Olivia's shift passed in a blur of paperwork and routine calls, but her mind kept drifting back to the archives, to the photograph of the young woman in the alley, to Chief Hawkins' cryptic warning. By the time she clocked out and made her way to O'Malley's, a cozy Irish pub just a few blocks from the precinct, Olivia was a bundle of nervous energy. Sophia was already there, ensconced in a dimly lit booth near the back, 2 pints of Guinness waiting on the scarred wooden table. As Olivia slid into the seat across from her, Sophia leaned forward, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "All right, spill," she demanded, pushing one of the pints towards Olivia. "What's got you so wound up?" Olivia took a long sip of her beer, gathering her thoughts. Finally, she set the glass down and met Sophia's gaze. "I've been going through some of my grandfather's old case files," she began, her voice low. "Cold cases, mostly. Unsolved murders, missing persons." Sophia's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, talk about a blast from the past. Find anything interesting?" "Maybe," Olivia replied, hesitation coloring her tone. "There's this one case from 1974. A young woman found murdered in an alley downtown. Something about it feels, I don't know, familiar somehow. Like I've seen her before." "Well, that's impossible," Sophia pointed out. "You weren't even born then." I know. Olivia sighed, frustration evident in her voice. It doesn't make any sense. But I can't shake this feeling that there's more to it. And then there's what Chief Hawkins said. She recounted her conversation with the chief, watching as Sophia's expression grew more intrigued with each word. When she finished, her friend let out a low whistle. Okay, now that is interesting, Sophia mused, tapping her fingers against her glass. Sounds like the chief knows something she's not telling you. Olivia nodded, leaning in closer. Exactly. And I can't help but wonder if it has something to do with this case. But why would she warn me off? What could be in those old files that's so dangerous? Sophia's eyes lit up with the thrill of a potential story. Well, there's only one way to find out, isn't there? We dig deeper. As Olivia opened her mouth to respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to find Marcus standing there, his expression unreadable. Sorry to interrupt, ladies, he said, his voice low and urgent. But we've got a situation, Reeves. There's been a murder downtown. And, well, you're gonna want to see this for yourself. The pit in Olivia's stomach deepened as she met Marcus's grim gaze. Something told her that her grandfather's past and her present were about to collide in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. The neon lights of Oakwood's downtown district cast an eerie glow over the crime scene as Olivia ducked under the yellow police tape. The alley was a cacophony of flashing red and blue lights, uniformed officers securing the perimeter, and the low murmur of onlookers gathering at the edges of the cordoned-off area. Marcus led her deeper into the alley, his face grim in the harsh glare of the portable floodlights. As they approached the center of the activity, Olivia's steps faltered. The scene before her was like a macabre déjà vu, ripped straight from the pages of her grandfather's case file. A young woman lay sprawled on the dirty asphalt, her unseeing eyes staring up at the night sky. The positioning of the body, the wound patterns visible on her exposed skin, it was all hauntingly familiar. Jesus, Olivia breathed, her mind reeling. It's just like the 74 case, Marcus finished, his voice low. Yeah, I noticed that too. Uncanny, isn't it? Olivia knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb any potential evidence. Up close, the similarities were even more striking. The victim appeared to be in her mid-20s, with long dark hair fanned out around her head like a morbid halo. Her clothing, a vintage-style dress and boots, could have come straight from the 1970s. What do we know so far? Olivia asked, forcing herself to focus on the present. To approach this as she would any other crime scene, Marcus flipped open his notepad. Victim's name is Emily Thorne, 26 years old. Bartender at a nearby retro club called The Time Warp. She was found about an hour ago by a couple taking a shortcut home from a movie. As Marcus continued to brief her on the initial findings, Olivia's gaze was drawn to a glint of metal near the victim's outstretched hand. Pulling on a pair of latex gloves, she carefully reached for the object. It was a locket, tarnished silver on a delicate chain. With a growing sense of unease, Olivia gently pried it open. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, the spitting image of the victim lying before her. Marcus, she called, her voice tight. Take a look at this single quotes. He crouched beside her, squinting at the tiny photograph. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. That's not our Vic, is it? Olivia shook her head slowly. No, I don't think so. The clothing, the hairstyle, it's all wrong for our time. This photo looks like it's from the 70s. Marcus finished, meeting her gaze with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Before they could discuss it further, a commotion at the edge of the crime scene drew their attention. Chief Hawkins had arrived, her face a mask of controlled tension as she strode towards them. Reeves, Torres, she barked. My car. Now, we need to talk. The drive back to the precinct was tense, filled with a heavy silence that seemed to press in on them from all sides. Chief Hawkins' knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched as she navigated the nearly empty streets. Finally, as they pulled into the station's parking lot, she spoke. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this car. Understood? Olivia and Marcus exchanged a quick glance before nodding their assent. Hawkins took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on some point in the distance. The case you found in the archives, Reeves, the 74 murder, it wasn't just another cold case. It was the beginning of something, something we thought we put an end to decades ago. She turned to face them, her expression grave. Over the course of 2 years, from 74 to 76, there were 5 murders. All young women, all killed in the same manner, all left in alleyways downtown. The press dubbed the killer the timekeeper because of his habit of leaving vintage timepieces with the bodies. Olivia's mind raced, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed. And tonight's murder is the same. Oh? Hawkins nodded grimly, down to the last detail, which means either we're dealing with a copycat with intimate knowledge of a 50-year-old case, or the real timekeeper is back. Marcus finished, his voice barely above a whisper. The implications hung heavy in the air. Olivia's thoughts swirled, a turbulent mix of fear, excitement, and a growing sense that she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than she'd imagined. There's more, Hawkins continued, her voice strained. The original task force assigned to the timekeeper case. Your grandfather was the lead detective, Olivia. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Suddenly, Chief Hawkins' earlier warning took on a whole new meaning. Is that why you tried to warn me off the cold cases? Olivia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Hawkins nodded slowly. Your grandfather. The case consumed him. It nearly destroyed him. When the killing stopped in 76, he was convinced the timekeeper was still out there, biding his time. But there was no evidence, no leads. Eventually, the case went cold, and life in Oakwood moved on. But James, he never really let it go. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they only led to more questions. Why had her grandfather never mentioned this case? What had he discovered that had affected him so deeply? And most pressingly, was the timekeeper truly back, or were they dealing with something else entirely? As if reading her thoughts, Hawkins continued, I know you have questions, Olivia. Hell, we all do. But right now, we need to focus on the present. If this is indeed the work of the timekeeper, or even a copycat, we need to move fast. More lives could be at stake. Olivia nodded, her detective instincts kicking in despite the emotional turmoil roiling beneath the surface. What's our next move, Chief? For now, we keep this quiet. No press, no leaks. As far as anyone outside this car knows, we're dealing with an isolated incident. Hawkins' tone brooked no argument. Torres, I want you to dig into our victim's background. Friends, family, co-workers. Find out if she had any connection to the original timekeeper cases. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone to make notes. Reeves, Hawkins continued, fixing Olivia with an intense gaze. I need you to go through your grandfather's files with a fine-tooth comb. Look for any details he might have overlooked, any connections to our current victim. And be prepared. You might find things in those files that change how you see your grandfather. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. This wasn't just another case. It was a direct link to her family's past, to the legacy she built her life around. And now, that legacy was threatening to unravel before her eyes. As they exited the car, Hawkins placed a hand on Olivia's arm, holding her back for a moment. Olivia, she said, her voice softer than before. I know this is personal for you, but I need you to promise me something. If it comes down to a choice between protecting your grandfather's reputation and solving this case, you'll do the right thing. The implication behind Hawkins' words sent a chill down Olivia's spine. What could her grandfather have done that would require such a promise? But she met the chief's gaze steadily, her voice firm as she replied, I became a detective to find the truth, Chief, no matter where it leads. Hawkins nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. Good, because I have a feeling this case is going to take us to some very dark places before it's over. As Olivia watched Hawkins walk away, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Sophia. Heard about the murder downtown. You okay? Call me if you need anything. Olivia hesitated, her thumb hovering over the keypad. Part of her longed to confide in her friend, to share the weight of what she'd just learned. But Hawkins' warning about keeping things quiet echoed in her mind. Finally, she typed out a quick response. I'm fine, but I might need your help with something soon. Keep your schedule clear. As she hit send, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads. Whatever path she chose from here, would irrevocably change her life, and possibly the lives of everyone in Oakwood. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and headed back into the precinct. It was time to uncover the secrets her grandfather had taken to his grave. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the grimy windows of the precinct, Olivia sat hunched over her grandfather's case files, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. The bullpen around her was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of paper or the distant ring of a phone. She'd spent the night immersed in the details of the original timekeeper murders, each new revelation sending a chill down her spine. The victims, all young women in their mid-20s, all with some connection to Oakwood's thriving nightlife scene in the 1970s. The murder weapon, never found, but believed to be a custom-made blade with a distinctive curve. And the calling card, vintage timepieces left with each body, all stopped at the exact time of death. But it was the notes in the margins, scribbled in her grandfather's familiar handwriting, that truly captivated Olivia. Cryptic references to the inner circle and the watchmaker's apprentice peppered the pages, hinting at a conspiracy that went far beyond a simple serial killer case. As she flipped to the next page, a small envelope slipped out, yellowed with age. With trembling fingers, Olivia opened it, revealing a faded photograph. Her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the faces staring back at her. It was a group shot, clearly from the 1970s, judging by the clothing and hairstyles. In the center stood her grandfather, younger than she'd ever seen him, his arm around a beautiful woman Olivia recognized as her grandmother. But it was the other faces in the photo that sent a jolt of shock through her system. Chief Hawkins was there, decades younger but unmistakable. And next to her, Olivia's blood ran cold. The man standing beside the young Diana Hawkins was none other than Judge Edward Blackwood, one of the most respected and feared figures in Oakwood's judicial system. Find anything interesting? Olivia nearly jumped out of her skin at the sound of Marcus's voice. She quickly slipped the photograph back into the envelope, her heart racing. Jesus, Marcus, you scared the hell out of me. He raised an eyebrow, clearly noting her flustered state. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. You've been at this all night? Olivia nodded, rubbing her tired eyes. Yeah, there's a lot to go through. What about you? Any luck with our victim's background? Marcus sank into the chair across from her desk, his expression grim. Emily Thorne was a model employee, beloved by her coworkers at the Time Warp. No criminal record, no known enemies. But here's where it gets weird. I dug into her family history. Turns out her grandmother, Elizabeth Thorne, was one of the original timekeeper victims in 1974. The revelation hit Olivia like a punch to the gut. That can't be a coincidence, she muttered, her mind racing. The locket we found at the scene, it must have belonged to Elizabeth. Marcus nodded. My thoughts exactly. But here's the kicker. According to the old case files, Elizabeth's body was never found. She was presumed dead based on the evidence at the scene. But there was always a chance she survived. Olivia finished, the implications sending a chill down her spine, which means Emily might not have been a random victim. She could have been targeted specifically because of her connection to the original case. Before Marcus could respond, Chief Hawkins' voice cut through the quiet of the bullpen. Reeves, Torres, my office, now. As they made their way to the chief's office, Olivia's mind whirled with questions. Should she mention the photograph she'd found? The cryptic notes in her grandfather's files? And what about the connection between Emily Thorne and the original victims? Hawkins was on the phone when they entered, her face a mask of tension. Understood. Keep me posted. She hung up, fixing Olivia and Marcus with a grim stare. We've got another body. The bottom dropped out of Olivia's stomach. Where? Abandoned warehouse on the east side, Hawkins replied, already reaching for her coat. And before you ask, yes, it fits the timekeeper's MO, right down to the vintage watch left at the scene. As they rushed to the crime scene, Olivia's mind raced. 2 murders in less than 24 hours, both mirroring a 50-year-old cold case. This wasn't just a copycat. This was something far more sinister. The warehouse was a hulking, rusted behemoth, a relic of Oakwood's industrial past. As they approached, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap carefully laid decades ago. Inside, the scene was like something out of a nightmare. The victim, another young woman, lay sprawled on a makeshift altar of old machinery parts. The vintage watch placed on her chest seemed to mock them, its hands frozen at 5:23. As the crime scene techs swarmed around them, Olivia found herself drawn to a far corner of the warehouse. There, barely visible in the gloom, was a symbol spray-painted on the wall, a stylized eye inside a clock face. "Chief," she called, her voice tight. "You need to see this." Hawkins approached, her sharp intake of breath the only indication of her shock. "It can't be," she murmured, almost to herself. "You recognize this symbol?" Olivia pressed, studying the chief's face carefully. For a moment, Hawkins seemed to age before her eyes, the weight of decades-old secrets pressing down on her shoulders. "It's the mark of the inner circle," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "A group your grandfather believed was behind the timekeeper murders." The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they only led to more questions. "Chief," Olivia began, choosing her words carefully, "I found something in my grandfather's files. A photograph." Before she could continue, a shout from across the warehouse cut through the air. "We've got a survivor!" In an instant, the atmosphere in the warehouse shifted. Paramedics rushed past them, converging on a pile of debris in the far corner. As Olivia watched, they carefully extracted a young woman, battered and barely conscious, but undeniably alive. "Get her to the hospital," Hawkins barked, her composure regained. "And I want a protective detail on her room 24/7. No one gets in or out without my express permission, understood?" As the paramedics whisked the survivor away, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just stumbled upon the key to unraveling this entire mystery. But with that hope came a gnawing dread. Whoever was behind these murders now knew they had a loose end. The race against time had truly begun, and Olivia couldn't help but wonder if they were already too late to stop whatever sinister plan had been set in motion half a century ago. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was electric with a mixture of fear and determination. Officers and detectives huddled in small groups, their voices low and urgent as they compared notes and theories. Olivia, however, found herself drawn back to her grandfather's files, searching for any clue that might shed light on the inner circle and their connection to the timekeeper murders. As she pored over the documents, a familiar voice cut through her concentration. "Burning the midnight oil again, Detective Reeves?" Olivia looked up to find Sophia standing by her desk, 2 cups of coffee in hand. The journalist's keen eyes scanned the mess of papers spread out before her, a mixture of curiosity and concern on her face. "Sophia," Olivia sighed, gratefully accepting the offered coffee. "What are you doing here?" "Heard about the second body on the police scanner," Sophia replied, pulling up a chair. "Figured you could use a caffeine boost. And maybe a fresh set of eyes?" For a moment, Olivia hesitated. Hawkins' warning about keeping things quiet echoed in her mind. But as she looked at her friend's determined face, she realized she needed an ally outside the department, someone who could dig into places the police couldn't. "All right," Olivia said finally, her voice low. "But what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. Got it?" Sophia nodded solemnly, pulling out her notepad. "You have my word. Now, start from the beginning." As Olivia recounted the events of the past 24 hours, the connection to her grandfather's old case, the mysterious inner circle, the survivor at the warehouse, she could see the wheels turning in Sophia's mind. "So, we're not just dealing with a copycat," Sophia mused, tapping her pen against her notepad. "This goes deeper, much deeper." Olivia nodded grimly. "And I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something crucial. Something that ties all of this together." Sophia's eyes lit up with the thrill of a potential breakthrough. "What about the survivor? Have you had a chance to talk to her yet?" "Not yet," Olivia replied, frustration evident in her voice. "She's still unconscious. The doctors say it could be hours before she's stable enough for questioning." A sly smile spread across Sophia's face. "Well then, I guess it's time for some good old-fashioned investigative journalism. Leave it to me. I'll see what I can dig up on our mystery survivor." As Sophia gathered her things to leave, Olivia caught her arm. "Be careful, Soph. Whoever's behind this, They're not going to want their secrets exposed. Sophia's expression softened, and she gave Olivia's hand a reassuring squeeze. Hey, Careful is my middle name. Well, actually it's Marie, but you know what I mean. I'll be in touch. Single quotes. As Olivia watched her friend disappear into the bustle of the precinct, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all pawns in a game that had been set in motion decades ago. And somewhere out there, the timekeeper was watching, waiting for his moment to strike again. The hospital corridor was a blur of activity as Olivia strode purposefully towards the ICU, her badge held out before her like a shield. It had been nearly 12 hours since the survivor had been brought in, and Olivia's patience was wearing thin. As she approached the guarded room, a familiar figure stepped into her path. Detective Marcus Torres, his face haggard from lack of sleep, held up a hand to stop her. "Slow down, Reeves," he said, his voice low. "Doc says she's still pretty out of it. We might not get much." Olivia took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "We have to try, Marcus. 2 women are dead, and God knows how many more might be in danger." "If she saw anything at all," Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "I know. Just tread lightly, okay? She's been through hell." As they entered the room, the steady beep of monitors filled the air. The survivor, identified as Melissa Chun, 24, lay pale and fragile against the stark white hospital sheets. Her eyes fluttered open as they approached, fear and confusion evident in her gaze. "Miss Chun," Olivia said softly, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I'm Detective Olivia Reeves, and this is my partner, Detective Torres. We know you've been through a terrible ordeal, but we need to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" Melissa nodded weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try." Over the next hour, Olivia and Marcus gently coaxed out the details of Melissa's horrifying experience. She had been leaving work at a downtown bar when someone grabbed her from behind. The next thing she knew, she was in the warehouse, bound and terrified. "Did you see the person who took you?" Olivia asked, leaning forward slightly. "Anything at all? Height, build, voice?" Melissa's brow furrowed in concentration. He wore a mask, old-fashioned, like something from a masquerade ball. But his eyes, she shuddered visibly. They were so cold, like he wasn't even human. As Melissa continued, describing snippets of overheard conversations and the terrifying ritual-like atmosphere in the warehouse, Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. It was all too similar to the accounts from the original timekeeper cases, but it was Melissa's final revelation that truly shook Olivia to her core. "Before I passed out," Melissa said, her voice trembling, "I heard him say something. He said, 'The circle must be completed. Time waits for no one.'" Olivia and Marcus exchanged a loaded glance. The inner circle. It couldn't be a coincidence. As they left the hospital, Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. "We need to dig deeper into this inner circle," she said as they climbed into the car. "My grandfather was convinced they were behind the original murders. If they're active again after all these years." Marcus nodded grimly. "I'll put in a request for any files we have on known secret societies or cults in Oakwood's history. Maybe we can—" He was cut off by the shrill ring of Olivia's phone. It was Sophia. "Liv, you're not going to believe what I found." The journalist's excited voice came through the speaker. "I've been digging into the background of our first victim, Emily Thorne. Turns out, she was working on a book about Oakwood's hidden history. And get this, her research notes mentioned something called the Watchmaker's Society." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The Watchmaker's Apprentice, the phrase she'd seen scribbled in her grandfather's notes. "Sophia, this is huge," she said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "Where are you now? At Emily's apartment?" Sophia replied. "I managed to convince her roommate to let me take a look around. You should see this place, Liv. It's like a conspiracy theorist's dream. Maps, timelines, old newspaper clippings." "Stay there," Olivia interrupted. "We're on our way. And Sophia, be careful. Don't touch anything and don't let anyone else in." Got it, Detective," Sophia replied, a hint of teasing in her voice. "I'll be a perfect angel until you arrive." As Marcus sped through the streets of Oakwood, lights flashing, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of a major breakthrough. With that hope came a gnawing dread. If the inner circle was truly behind these murders, how deep did the conspiracy go? And more importantly, how far would they go to keep their secrets buried? Emily Thorne's apartment was a maze of organized chaos. Every available surface was covered with papers, photographs, and sticky notes, all connected by a web of red string that crisscrossed the room. Sophia stood in the center of it all, her eyes wide with excitement as Olivia and Marcus entered. "This is incredible," she breathed, gesturing to the walls. Emily was onto something big. "Look at this timeline." Olivia approached the wall, her eyes scanning the meticulously crafted chronology. It started in the late 1800s with the founding of something called the Watchmakers Society and continued through to the present day. The timekeeper murders of the 1970s were prominently featured, along with other seemingly unrelated events in Oakwood's history. "My God," Marcus muttered, his voice filled with awe and horror. "If this is accurate, the inner circle has been manipulating events in this city for over a century." As Olivia delved deeper into Emily's research, a pattern began to emerge. Every 50 years, like clockwork, there was a surge of unexplained deaths and disappearances in Oakwood. And each time, it coincided with the rising of a particular celestial alignment. "The next alignment is due this year," Sophia said, pointing to a circled date on a calendar. 3 days from now, to be exact. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. That's why the killings have started again. They're building up to something. As they continued to sift through the mountain of information, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Chief Hawkins. "Meet you back at the station, a new development." Olivia turned to Sophia, her expression serious. "We need to get all of this back to the precinct. It could be the key to cracking this whole thing wide open." As they carefully packed up Emily's research, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The inner circle had managed to keep their secrets for over a century. How many more lives would be lost before they could finally bring them to justice? Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Chief Hawkins ushered them into a conference room, her face grave. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "Judge Blackwood is demanding we hand over all files related to the timekeeper case, both past and present." Olivia's mind flashed to the photograph she'd found in her grandfather's files, the one with a much younger Blackwood standing alongside Hawkins and her grandparents. "On what grounds?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He claims it's part of a larger federal investigation." Hawkins replied, her tone making it clear she didn't buy it for a second. "But given what we've uncovered about the inner circle, he's trying to cover something up," Marcus finished, his expression darkening. Olivia's mind raced. If Blackwood was indeed part of the inner circle, then they were dealing with a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Oakwood's power structure. But how could they prove it? As if reading her thoughts, Sophia spoke up. "What if we could get him on record? If we could somehow trick him into revealing his connection to the inner circle?" "It's too risky," Hawkins cut in. "If Blackwood is as powerful as we suspect, one wrong move could blow this whole investigation." But Olivia's mind was already formulating a plan. "Maybe not," she said slowly. "What if we used Emily's research as bait? Let it leak that we've uncovered some damning evidence, but keep the details vague. If Blackwood is involved, he'll have to make a move." The room fell silent as they considered the implications. It was a dangerous gambit, but with time running out and more lives potentially at stake, they were running out of options. Finally, Hawkins nodded. "Do it, but be careful. If the inner circle has survived this long, they're not going to go down without a fight." As the group dispersed to put their plan into action, Olivia found herself drawn back to her grandfather's old files. There had to be something there, some final piece of the puzzle that would help them unravel this decades-old mystery. As she flipped through the pages, a small handwritten note fell out. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written in her grandfather's later years. With trembling fingers, Olivia unfolded it and began to read. "To whoever finds this, I'm sorry. I thought I could protect you by keeping silent, but I see now that my silence has only allowed evil to fester. The inner circle is more than just a secret society. They are the keepers of an ancient power, one that demands sacrifice every 50 years. I couldn't stop them then, but maybe, armed with this knowledge, you can. Look to the clock tower. The truth lies in the heart of time itself. Olivia's heart raced as she reread the note. The clock tower, the centerpiece of Oakwood's historic downtown district. Could it be the key to unraveling this entire mystery? As she stood to share her discovery with the others, a shadow fell across her desk. She looked up to find Judge Blackwood standing there, his eyes cold and calculating. "Detective Reeves," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "I think it's time you and I had a little chat about your grandfather's old case files. Don't you?" Olivia felt her heart rate spike, but years of training kicked in, allowing her to maintain a calm exterior. She met Judge Blackwood's gaze steadily, her voice level as she replied, "Of course, Your Honor. I'd be happy to discuss the case with you. Perhaps we could use one of the interview rooms?" As she led Blackwood towards a more private area, Olivia's mind raced. She needed to buy time, to keep him talking without revealing how much they truly knew. More importantly, she needed to find a way to signal the others without alerting Blackwood. The interview room was small and austere, its walls a dull beige that seemed to absorb what little light filtered in through the single window. Olivia gestured for Blackwood to take a seat, positioning herself between him and the door. "So, Detective," Blackwood began, his tone deceptively casual, "I understand you've been looking into some rather sensitive matters regarding your grandfather's old cases." Olivia nodded, her expression neutral. "That's correct, Your Honor. Given the similarities between the recent murders and the timekeeper cases from the 70s, it seemed prudent to review all available information." Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what, pray tell, have you discovered in your investigations?" It was a loaded question, and Olivia knew she had to tread carefully. "We've uncovered some intriguing connections," she said, deliberately vague. "It seems the timekeeper case may have had broader implications than originally thought." As she spoke, Olivia casually reached for her phone, as if checking the time. In reality, she was sending a prearranged signal to Marcus and Sophia. 3 quick taps on the screen, a code they had established earlier to indicate trouble. Blackwood leaned forward, his demeanor shifting almost imperceptibly. "Broader implications? How fascinating. And what sort of implications might those be, Detective Reeves?" Olivia met his gaze squarely, her voice steady. "Well, Your Honor, we've come across references to something called the inner circle. Does that term mean anything to you?" The change in Blackwood was subtle but unmistakable. A tightening around the eyes, a slight tension in his shoulders. To an untrained observer, it might have gone unnoticed. But Olivia saw it clearly. She had struck a nerve. "The inner circle?" Blackwood repeated, his tone carefully measured. "I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that term. It sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory, doesn't it?" Before Olivia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Marcus poked his head in, his expression carefully neutral. "Sorry to interrupt, Detective Reeves, but Chief Hawkins needs to see you immediately. It's urgent." Olivia nodded, turning back to Blackwood with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but duty calls. Perhaps we could continue this conversation later." Blackwood stood, straightening his suit jacket. "Of course, Detective. I look forward to hearing more about your investigations." The threat in his voice was barely veiled. As Blackwood left the room, Olivia felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to Marcus, her voice low and urgent. "We need to move fast. Blackwood's definitely involved, and he knows we're onto something." Marcus nodded grimly. "Sophia's gone through more of Emily's research. You're not going to believe what she found." They hurried to the conference room, where Sophia and Chief Hawkins were huddled over a spread of documents. Sophia looked up as they entered, her eyes bright with excitement and fear. "Liv, this is big," she said without preamble. Emily had uncovered evidence of a ritual, something the inner circle performs every 50 years. It's tied to that celestial alignment I mentioned earlier. Olivia's mind flashed to her grandfather's note. "The clock tower?" She breathed. "It has something to do with the clock tower, doesn't it?" Sophia nodded, spreading out a series of old blueprints. "The Oakwood Clock Tower was built in 1873, supposedly as a gift from a wealthy benefactor. But look at these original designs. As Olivia leaned in, she saw what Sophia was pointing to. Hidden within the intricate machinery of the clock was a series of symbols and configurations that seemed out of place in a simple timepiece. "It's not just a clock," Hawkins said, her voice tight. "It's some kind of ritual device. And if Emily's research is correct," Sophia continued, "the inner circle uses it to channel some kind of energy during these alignments. That's what the murders are for. Their sacrifice is to power whatever this thing does." The implications were staggering. Olivia's mind reeled as she tried to process what they were suggesting. A secret society, hidden in plain sight for over a century, using murder to fuel some kind of arcane ritual? It sounded like something out of a horror novel, but the evidence was there, staring them in the face. And with the next alignment just days away, they were running out of time to stop it. "We need to get into that clock tower," Olivia said, her voice filled with determination. "If we can disrupt whatever mechanism they're using, it won't be easy," Marcus cautioned. "The tower's been closed for renovations for months, and you can bet the inner circle will have it heavily guarded." Chief Hawkins stood, her expression grim but resolute. "We'll need a plan, a way to get in undetected and neutralize any opposition without alerting Blackwood or his cronies." As they began to hash out the details of their operation, Olivia couldn't shake a nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach. They were about to confront a force that had managed to stay hidden for over a century, a group powerful enough to manipulate the very fabric of their city's history. And somewhere out there, the timekeeper was watching, waiting for his moment to strike again. The weight of all those lives, past, present, and future, pressed down on Olivia's shoulders. They had one chance to get this right, to end the cycle of violence that had plagued Oakwood for generations. As night fell over the city, casting long shadows across the streets, Olivia found herself standing before her grandfather's grave. The cool marble was a stark contrast to the warmth of the fading sunlight. "I wish you were here, Grandpa," she whispered, her fingers tracing the engraved letters of his name. "I have so many questions, but I promise you, I'll finish what you started. I'll find the truth, no matter what it costs." As she turned to leave, a flicker of movement caught her eye. For a brief moment, she could have sworn she saw a figure watching her from the shadows of a nearby mausoleum. But when she looked again, there was nothing there but darkness and silence. Olivia shook off the eerie feeling and headed back to her car. In less than 48 hours, they would make their move on the clock tower. And one way or another, the long-hidden secrets of the inner circle would finally be brought to light. The game was nearing its end, and Olivia was determined to see justice served, not just for the recent victims, but for all those who had suffered at the hands of the timekeeper over the decades. As she drove back into the heart of Oakwood, the city's lights glittering like stars fallen to earth, she steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead. The final countdown had begun. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of intense preparation and mounting tension. Olivia, Marcus, and a hand-picked team of trusted officers pored over blueprints of the clock tower, memorizing every possible entry point and escape route. Sophia, working tirelessly behind the scenes, continued to dig deeper into Emily's research, searching for any last-minute intel that could give them an edge. As the plan took shape, Olivia couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The pieces were falling into place almost too neatly. If the inner circle was as powerful and far-reaching as they suspected, surely they would have caught wind of their investigation by now. On the eve of their operation, Olivia found herself alone in the precinct's evidence room, surrounded by the accumulated history of the timekeeper case. Photographs of victims from decades past stared back at her, their eyes seeming to plead for justice long denied. A soft knock at the door startled her from her reverie. Chief Hawkins entered, her face etched with concern. "You should be resting, Reeves," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Tomorrow's going to be a hell of a day." Olivia nodded, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "I know, Chief. I can't shake this feeling that we're missing something, that we're walking into a trap." Hawkins was silent for a long moment, her eyes scanning the evidence laid out before them. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Your grandfather had the same instincts. You know, that ability to sense when something wasn't quite right. Olivia looked up sharply. Chief, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. That photograph I found in my grandfather's files, the one with you and Judge Blackwood? Hawkins held up a hand, stopping her. I know what you're going to ask, Olivia, and you deserve the truth. She took a deep breath, seeming to steel herself. Your grandfather and I, we were part of a task force assembled in secret to investigate the Inner Circle. Blackwood was our liaison to the judiciary, or so we thought. The implications hit Olivia like a physical blow. You were investigating them even back then? But why didn't you stop them? Hawkins finished, a bitter smile twisting her lips. We tried. God, we tried. But every time we got close, something would happen. Evidence would disappear. Witnesses would recant or vanish. And then she trailed off, her eyes distant with painful memories. Olivia waited, hardly daring to breathe. The night we were supposed to make our move, Hawkins continued, her voice thick with emotion. Your grandmother was killed. It was made to look like a tragic accident, but your grandfather knew. We all knew. It was a warning. Olivia felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. All these years, she had believed her grandmother had died in a car crash. To learn that she had been murdered, that her death was tied to this case. Why didn't he tell me? Olivia whispered, her voice cracking. Hawkins placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. He wanted to protect you, Olivia. We all did. We hoped that by backing off, by letting the Inner Circle think they had won, we could keep the people we loved safe. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. Her entire life, her career choice, her dedication to justice, all of it had been shaped by a history she hadn't even known existed. And now, she asked, meeting Hawkins' gaze, are we walking into the same trap? Hawkins straightened, her expression hardening with resolve. Not this time. We're smarter now, more prepared, and we have something they don't expect. What's that? A small smile played at the corners of Hawkins' mouth. You, Olivia, they don't know about you. You're a wild card. As Hawkins turned to leave, she paused at the door. Get some rest, detective. Tomorrow, we make history, one way or another. Left alone once more, Olivia's mind raced with the implications of what she had learned. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just about solving a case or stopping a killer. It was about finishing what her grandfather had started, about breaking a cycle of violence and corruption that had plagued Oakwood for generations. With renewed determination, she began to review the plan one last time. As she did, her eyes fell on a detail in the clock tower blueprints she hadn't noticed before. A small chamber, hidden behind the main clockwork mechanism, accessible only through a narrow passage. Her heart racing, Olivia pulled out her phone and dialed Sophia. Soph, I need you to check something in Emily's research, she said as soon as her friend picked up. Look for any mention of a hidden room in the clock tower, something that might serve as a focal point for their ritual. She could hear the rustle of papers as Sophia searched. Hold on, I think I've got something. Yes, Emily's notes mention a Heart of Time chamber. She believed it was where the Inner Circle conducted the core of their ritual. The phrase sent a chill down Olivia's spine. The truth lies in the heart of time itself. Her grandfather's final message suddenly took on a whole new meaning. Sophia, you're a lifesaver, Olivia breathed. I think I know where we need to focus our efforts tomorrow. As she hung up, a new piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They had been so focused on the clock mechanism itself, they had almost missed the true target. Whatever power the Inner Circle was trying to harness, whatever ritual they were preparing to perform, it would center on that hidden chamber. With this new information, Olivia began to modify their plan. It was risky. The passage to the chamber would be narrow, defensible. But if they could get there, if they could disrupt the ritual at its source, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Olivia finally allowed herself a moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring challenges unlike any she had faced before. But for the first time since this case began, she felt a glimmer of hope. They had a chance, however slim, to put an end to the Timekeeper's reign of terror once and for all. In her dreams, Olivia saw her grandfather and grandmother, young and vibrant as they were in that old photograph. They smiled at her, their eyes filled with pride and encouragement. And as the dream faded, she could have sworn she heard her grandfather's voice, whispering on the edge of consciousness. "The time has come, Olivia. Finish what we started." The morning of the operation dawned clear and crisp, the autumn air carrying a hint of impending change. As Olivia strapped on her bulletproof vest and checked her weapon one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that by day's end, Oakwood would be irrevocably altered, for better or worse. The team gathered in the precinct's briefing room, faces grim with determination. Marcus stood at Olivia's side, a steady presence that helped calm her nerves. Chief Hawkins addressed the group, her voice steady and authoritative. "We all know what's at stake here," she said, her eyes sweeping across the assembled officers. "This goes beyond any normal operation. We're not just stopping criminals. We're fighting to reclaim the very soul of our city. Whatever happens in that tower, remember your training, watch each other's backs, and above all, stay focused on the mission." As the team moved out, splitting into their assigned groups, Olivia felt a hand on her arm. She turned to find Sophia, her expression a mix of worry and determination. "Be careful in there, Liv," she said softly. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Olivia managed a small smile. "When have you known me to be anything but careful?" Sophia rolled her eyes, but there was affection in her voice as she replied, "Just come back in one piece, okay? You still owe me dinner from that bet last month." With a final nod to her friend, Olivia joined Marcus in the lead vehicle. As they sped towards the clock tower, the enormity of what they were about to attempt settled over her like a heavy cloak. Years of corruption, decades of hidden violence, all coming to a head in the next few hours. The clock tower loomed before them, its Gothic spire reaching towards the sky like an accusing finger. As they approached, Olivia's trained eye picked out subtle signs of heightened security, men in nondescript clothing patrolling the perimeter, cameras angled to cover every approach. "Looks like they're expecting company," Marcus muttered, his hand tightening on his weapon. Olivia nodded grimly. "Then let's not disappoint them." As the team moved into position, the air crackled with tension. Olivia and Marcus led the primary assault group, their steps silent on the worn stone steps leading up to the tower's main entrance. The plan was to create a diversion at the ground level, while a smaller team, led by Olivia, would make their way to the hidden chamber. The first phase of the operation went smoothly, almost too smoothly. The security guards were quickly and quietly subdued, their communications disabled before they could raise an alarm. As they penetrated deeper into the tower, however, Olivia's sense of unease grew. "It's too easy," she whispered to Marcus as they cleared another floor. "Where's the resistance?" Marcus nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Maybe they didn't expect us to move so quickly." But Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being led into a trap. As they approached the access point to the hidden passage, her instincts screamed at her to be cautious. The narrow corridor leading to the Heart of Time chamber was dark and claustrophobic, barely wide enough for two people to walk abreast. Olivia took point, her weapon at the ready, every sense on high alert. Behind her, she could hear the controlled breathing of her team, feel the tension radiating from them in waves. As they neared the end of the passage, a faint glow became visible ahead. Olivia held up a hand, signaling the team to halt. She strained her ears, listening for any sign of movement or voices from beyond. Nothing. With a deep breath, she gave the signal to move forward. As they emerged into the chamber, the sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The room was circular, its walls covered in intricate clockwork mechanisms that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. In the center stood a raised dais, upon which rested an object that defied easy description. Part clock, part altar, its surface etched with symbols that hurt the eyes to look at directly. But it was the figure standing before the altar that made Olivia's blood run cold. Judge Blackwood turned to face them, his expression a mixture of triumph and disdain. He was dressed in elaborate robes, adorned with the same unsettling symbols that covered the altar. "Ah, Detective Reeves," he said, his voice echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "Right on time." Olivia's mind raced. How had he known they were coming? How had he gotten here ahead of them? "It's over, Blackwood," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "We know about the inner circle, about the sacrifices. It ends today." Blackwood's laugh was chilling. "Oh, my dear, it's only just beginning." With a gesture, the room erupted into chaos. Hidden panels in the walls slid open, revealing armed members of the inner circle. In seconds, Olivia and her team were surrounded, outgunned and outmaneuvered. "Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared for you?" Blackwood sneered. "We've known about your little investigation from the start. In fact, we've been counting on it." The realization hit Olivia like a physical blow. They hadn't just walked into a trap. They had been maneuvered into position like pieces on a chessboard. "You see," Blackwood continued, turning back to the altar, "the ritual requires more than just any sacrifice. It needs the blood of those who seek to oppose us. And you, my dear Olivia, are the final piece we've been waiting for." As he spoke, the clockwork mechanisms around the room began to move faster, the air filling with a low, ominous hum. Olivia could feel a strange energy building, making the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. "Your grandfather came close to stopping us 50 years ago," Blackwood said, his voice taking on an almost reverent tone. "But in the end, he too played his part in our grand design. And now, history repeats itself." Olivia's mind raced, searching for a way out of this impossible situation. Her team was outnumbered, their carefully laid plans in shambles. But as she looked around the room, taking in the faces of her captors, she noticed something, a flicker of uncertainty in some of their eyes, a hesitation in their postures. Not everyone here was a true believer. Taking a chance, Olivia spoke, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "Is this what you all signed up for? Murder? Human sacrifice? Look around you. Look at what you're enabling." She could see her words having an effect, sowing seeds of doubt. Blackwood must have sensed it too, because his expression darkened. "Enough," he roared. "The time has come. The alignment is upon us." As if on cue, the humming in the room intensified. The symbols on the altar began to glow, casting an eerie light throughout the chamber. Blackwood raised a ceremonial dagger, its blade glinting wickedly in the strange illumination. "Your blood will open the way," he intoned, advancing on Olivia. "The power of ages will be ours to command." Time seemed to slow. Olivia could see Marcus tensing beside her, ready to make a desperate move. She could feel the weight of her weapon in her hand, knew that in seconds, the room would erupt into violence. But before anyone could act, a new voice cut through the tension, a voice Olivia knew all too well. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Edward." All eyes turned to the entrance of the chamber. There, leaning heavily on a cane but with fire in his eyes, stood James Reeves, Olivia's grandfather, very much alive and looking ready for a fight. The shock of his appearance created a moment of confusion that Olivia and her team seized upon. In a flurry of movement, they disarmed the nearest guards, turning the tables on their captors. Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "You! How dare you interfere again?" James Reeves stepped further into the room, his gaze locked on Blackwood. "I made a mistake 50 years ago, letting you think you'd won. I won't make that mistake again." As chaos erupted around them, Olivia found herself face to face with Blackwood. The judge's composure had cracked, revealing the madness beneath. He lunged at her with the dagger, all pretense of ceremony forgotten in his desperation. Olivia dodged, her training kicking in. She could hear the sounds of struggle around her, knew that her team was fighting for their lives. But in this moment, her entire focus was on the man before her, the architect of so much pain and suffering. Their struggle brought them closer to the altar. Olivia could feel the energy emanating from it, a palpable force that made her skin crawl. She realized with sudden clarity that destroying the altar was the key to ending this, once and for all. With a burst of strength, she managed to knock the dagger from Blackwood's hand. It clattered to the ground, skidding across the floor and coming to rest at the base of the altar. For a moment, both of them froze, their eyes locked on the weapon. Then, moving as one, they both dove for it. Olivia's hand closed around the hilt a split second before Blackwood's. Without hesitation, she plunged the dagger into the heart of the altar. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. A blinding light erupted from the point of impact, accompanied by a deafening roar. Olivia felt herself being thrown backward, the world around her dissolving into chaos and noise. As she lost consciousness, her last thought was of her grandfather's face, proud, determined, and finally at peace. When Olivia came to, the world was eerily quiet. The chamber, once a marvel of arcane machinery, lay in ruins around her. Dust and debris filled the air, making it difficult to see or breathe. As her vision cleared, she saw figures moving through the haze. Marcus, battered but alive, helping other team members to their feet. And there, kneeling beside her, was her grandfather. "You did it, Liv," he said softly, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You finished what we started." As the dust settled and the full extent of what had transpired became clear, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The cycle of violence that had plagued Oakwood for generations was finally broken. But as she looked at the destruction around her, at the faces of those who had been caught up in this madness, she knew that the real work was just beginning. Healing the wounds of the past, bringing true justice to light. These would be the challenges of the days and years to come. For now, though, as sirens wailed in the distance and the first light of a new day began to filter through the shattered windows of the clock tower, Olivia allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. Time, it seemed, was finally on their side. The aftermath of the clock tower incident unfolded like a surreal dream. As dawn broke over Oakwood, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn streets, Olivia found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Emergency services swarmed the area, tending to the injured and securing the scene. Reporters clamored for information, their cameras flashing incessantly as they tried to piece together the events of the night. But for Olivia, the world had narrowed to a single point of focus: her grandfather, alive and breathing, sitting beside her on the back of an ambulance. "I don't understand," she said, her voice hoarse from the dust and smoke. "We thought I saw your grave." James Reeves smiled sadly, the lines on his face deepening. "It was necessary, Liv. After what happened to your grandmother, I knew the only way to protect you, to protect everyone, was to disappear. To let the inner circle think they had won." Olivia shook her head, trying to process this revelation. "But all these years, why didn't you tell me? Why now?" Her grandfather's eyes grew distant, filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "I've been watching, waiting for the right moment. When I saw you picking up the threads of the investigation, I knew the time had come, but I had to be careful. If Blackwood had suspected I was alive." He trailed off, but Olivia understood. The stakes had been too high, the risks too great. As if summoned by their conversation, Chief Hawkins approached, her face a mask of professional composure that did little to hide the turmoil beneath. "James," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "it's good to see you, old friend." The two shared a look that spoke volumes. Years of shared history, of secrets kept and burdens borne. Olivia felt like an outsider for a moment, acutely aware of how much she still didn't know about the past. Hawkins turned to Olivia, her expression softening. "You did good work tonight, Detective, but I'm afraid this is just the beginning. We've got a long road ahead of us." Olivia nodded, her mind already racing with the implications. The inner circle's influence ran deep, its tendrils reaching into every aspect of Oakwood's power structure. Rooting it out completely would be a monumental task. As if reading her thoughts, Hawkins continued, "We'll need to move carefully. There are still members of the inner circle out there, and they won't go down without a fight. But for now, you both need rest and medical attention," she added, eyeing the cuts and bruises that covered them. Reluctantly, Olivia allowed herself to be guided to a waiting ambulance. As she was about to climb in, a familiar voice called out, "Liv! Oh my God, Liv!" Sophia came running through the crowd, her press badge flapping wildly. She skidded to a halt in front of Olivia, her eyes wide as she took in her friend's battered appearance. "Are you okay? What happened in there?" "The whole city's talking about explosions and gunfire and—" "Is that your grandfather?" The rapid-fire questions brought a small smile to Olivia's lips, despite her exhaustion. "It's a long story, Soph, one I promised to tell you, but not right now, okay?" Sophia nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Of course. I'm glad you're all right. She hesitated for a moment, then pulled Olivia into a fierce hug. Don't you ever scare me like that again, she whispered fiercely. As the ambulance pulled away, Olivia caught a glimpse of Marcus coordinating with other officers. His face set in grim determination. She made a mental note to check on him later, knowing that he too would be grappling with the aftermath of what they'd discovered. The next few days passed in a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, and carefully worded press statements. The official story, a terrorist plot foiled by the brave actions of the Oakwood Police Department, was close enough to the truth to satisfy most, while obscuring the more fantastical elements of what had truly transpired. But for those who had been in that chamber, who had seen the impossible made real, life would never be quite the same. A week after the incident, Olivia found herself standing before a gathering of Oakwood's highest-ranking officials. The mood was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations and fear. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Hawkins began, her voice steady and authoritative. What I'm about to tell you will shake the very foundations of our city, but it is essential that we face this truth head-on if we hope to move forward. As Hawkins laid out the bare facts of the inner circle's existence and influence, Olivia watched the faces of those assembled. Some showed genuine shock and horror. Others, well, their carefully neutral expressions told her all she needed to know about their potential involvement. When Hawkins finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. It was the mayor who finally broke it, his voice trembling slightly. What do we do now? Olivia stepped forward, feeling the weight of all eyes upon her. We clean house, she said firmly, from the top down. No one is above suspicion. No one is exempt from scrutiny. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but it's the only way to ensure that something like this never happens again. Her words were met with a mixture of nods and uncomfortable shifting. She knew that what she was proposing would be met with resistance, that there would be those who would fight tooth and nail to maintain the status quo. But looking around the room, she also saw determination in many faces, a willingness to do what was necessary to reclaim their city. As the meeting adjourned, Olivia felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find her grandfather standing there, pride shining in his eyes. You did well in there, he said softly. You reminded me of your grandmother just then. She always had a way of cutting through the bullshit and getting to the heart of things. Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. There was still so much she wanted to ask him, so many gaps in her understanding of the past. But for now, this moment of connection was enough. As they left the building, stepping out into the crisp autumn air, Olivia was struck by how normal everything looked. The streets of Oakwood bustled with life, its citizens going about their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the seismic shifts taking place beneath the surface of their city. It's strange, isn't it? Her grandfather mused, as if reading her thoughts. How the world can change so dramatically and yet remain the same in so many ways. Olivia nodded, her gaze sweeping across the familiar skyline. The clock tower stood as it always had, its face now obscured by scaffolding as repairs began. But to her, it would never look quite the same again. We've got our work cut out for us, she said, more to herself than to her grandfather. James Reeves squeezed her shoulder gently. Yes, we do, but we'll face it together this time. No more secrets, no more shadows. As they walked down the street, Olivia felt a sense of purpose settling over her. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she had hope. Hope for justice, hope for healing, and hope for a future where the sins of the past could finally be laid to rest. The sun was setting as they reached the precinct, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Olivia paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of it. You know, she said, turning to her grandfather with a small smile, I think it's about time we had that long overdue family dinner. What do you say we invite Sophia and Marcus? I have a feeling we're all going to need each other in the days to come. James Reeves nodded, a twinkle in his eye. I'd like that, Liv. And maybe it's time I told you some stories about your grandmother. The real stories, not the sanitized versions you grew up with. As they entered the building, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The truth, in all its complexity and pain, was finally coming to light. And with it came the possibility of genuine healing for her family, for Oakwood, and for all those who had suffered in silence for far too long. The Timekeeper's reign of terror was over. Now, it was time to rebuild, to create a future where justice and truth could flourish in the light of day. And Olivia Reeves was ready to lead the charge. The weeks following the Clock Tower incident were a wind of activity. Olivia found herself at the center of a massive investigation, working tirelessly to unravel the complex web of corruption and deceit that the Inner Circle had woven. Throughout Oakwood's institutions, each day brought new revelations, some more shocking than others. Respected community leaders were exposed as longtime members of the Inner Circle. Cold cases, long thought unsolvable, were suddenly cast in a new light as connections to the secret society emerged. Through it all, Olivia leaned heavily on her growing support network. Marcus proved to be an invaluable partner, his steady presence and sharp mind helping to navigate the treacherous waters of internal politics. Sophia's investigative skills and media connections were crucial in managing the flow of information to the public, ensuring transparency while protecting the integrity of the ongoing investigation. And then there was her grandfather. James Reeves had become a fixture at the precinct, his decades of experience and intimate knowledge of the Inner Circle's operations proving invaluable. But more than that, Olivia cherished the opportunity to rebuild their relationship, to fill in the gaps of her family history that had been shrouded in secrecy for so long. One evening, as they pored over old case files in Olivia's living room, James paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "You know," he said softly, "your grandmother would be so proud of you. She always believed that the truth would come out someday." Olivia felt a lump form in her throat. "Tell me about her," she said, setting aside the file she'd been reading. "The real her, not just the stories I grew up with." James smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with a mixture of love and old pain. Margaret was a force of nature. Brilliant, fearless, with a sense of justice that put the rest of us to shame. She was the one who first noticed the pattern. You know, the cyclical nature of the disappearances. The way certain powerful figures always seemed to be on the periphery of the investigations. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. "When we started digging deeper, she was the one who pushed us to keep going, even when things got dangerous. She believed that no secret was worth the cost in human lives, no matter how powerful the people involved." Olivia listened, rapt, as her grandfather painted a picture of a woman she had never truly known. A woman of courage and conviction, whose life had been cut short in her pursuit of the truth. "The night she died," James said, his voice growing hoarse with emotion, "we were so close to breaking the case wide open. She had discovered a link between the Inner Circle and a series of ritual sites around the city. We were planning to raid one of them the next day." He fell silent for a moment, lost in the painful memories. Olivia reached out, placing her hand over his. "What happened?" she asked gently. James took a shuddering breath. "They got to her first. Made it look like a car accident, but I knew. We all knew. It was a message, a warning to back off." The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Olivia's shoulders. All these years, she had believed her grandmother's death to be a tragic accident. To learn that it had been a deliberate act, a silencing of a voice that had dared to speak out against injustice, filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. "That's why you disappeared," she said, the pieces finally falling into place. "You were protecting me." Single quotes. James nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too, Liv. So I made a deal with the devil. I agreed to disappear, to let them think they had won, in exchange for your safety." The enormity of her grandfather's sacrifice hit Olivia like a physical blow. All those years of absence, of unanswered questions and unspoken truths, had been born out of love and a desperate need to protect. "But you never stopped working the case, did you?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. A small, wry smile played at the corners of James' mouth. "No, I never stopped. I just had to be smarter about it, more cautious." I spent years building a network of contacts, gathering evidence bit by bit, always waiting for the right moment, the right person to pass the torch to. He reached out, cupping Olivia's cheek in his weathered hand. And then you joined the force, and I knew you were the one who could finish what we started. Olivia felt a surge of emotion, pride, love, and a fierce determination to honor the legacy of both her grandparents. "We will finish it," she said, her voice steady and sure. Together, as if on cue, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Marcus. "Major breakthrough. You need to see this. Precinct ASAP." Exchanging a quick glance with her grandfather, Olivia grabbed her jacket. The work was far from over, but with each passing day, they were getting closer to the truth, closer to justice for all those who had suffered at the hands of the Inner Circle. At the precinct, they found Marcus hunched over his computer, surrounded by stacks of documents and evidence bags. He looked up as they entered, his eyes bright with excitement despite the late hour. "You're not going to believe this," he said, gesturing for them to come closer. "Remember those ritual sites your grandmother discovered? Well, I think I've found a pattern." He pulled up a map of Oakwood on his screen, overlaid with a series of markers. "Each of these points corresponds to a location where we found evidence of Inner Circle activity. But look at this with a few keystrokes." He added another layer to the map. Suddenly, the seemingly random points connected, forming an intricate geometric pattern across the city. "It's a massive ritual circle," James breathed, leaning in for a closer look. "But what's it for?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm not sure yet, but I've got a theory. These points? They all correspond to major ley lines, supposed channels of mystical energy. The Inner Circle wasn't just committing random acts of violence. They were tapping into something bigger." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Even after everything they'd seen, the idea that there might be some greater, supernatural force at play was hard to comprehend. "So what does this mean for our investigation?" she asked, forcing herself to focus on the practical implications. "It means we might have a way to predict their next move," Marcus replied, his voice tinged with excitement. "If we can understand the pattern, we might be able to get ahead of them for once." As they delved deeper into Marcus's findings, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something monumental. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, revealing a picture far more complex and terrifying than any of them had imagined. But with that realization came a spark of hope. For the first time since this all began, they had a real chance to not just react to the Inner Circle's actions, but to proactively dismantle their operations. As the night wore on and plans began to take shape, Olivia found herself filled with a sense of purpose, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. This wasn't just about solving a case anymore. It was about reclaiming their city, about breaking a cycle of violence and corruption that had persisted for generations. And as she looked around at the determined faces of her team, Marcus with his brilliant mind, her grandfather with his years of hard-won experience, and all the others who had joined their cause, she knew that they were equal to the task. The Inner Circle had operated in the shadows for far too long, wielding their influence like a weapon against the innocent. But now, the light of truth was shining into those dark corners, exposing their secrets and stripping away their power. The road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and likely more sacrifices to come. But as the first light of dawn began to filter through the precinct windows, Olivia Reeves stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For her grandmother, for all the victims of the Inner Circle's machinations, and for the future of Oakwood itself, she would see this through to the end. The time for secrets and shadows was over. A new day was dawning in Oakwood, and with it, the promise of justice long denied. As the investigation into the Inner Circle deepened, Oakwood found itself in the throes of a transformation. The city, once shrouded in secrets and unspoken fears, was slowly awakening to the truth of its own history. For Olivia and her team, each day brought new challenges and revelations, testing their resolve and pushing them to their limits. The breakthrough with the Ritual Sites map had opened up new avenues of investigation, but it had also raised the stakes significantly. As they raced to uncover the full extent of the Inner Circle's plans, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. It was on a crisp autumn morning, nearly 3 months after the clock tower incident, that everything came to a head. Olivia was at her desk, sifting through a mountain of financial records, when Sophia burst into the precinct, her face flushed with excitement. "Liv, you need to see this," she said breathlessly, thrusting a folder into Olivia's hands. "I've been digging into some of Judge Blackwood's old cases, and I think I found something big." As Olivia scanned the documents, her eyes widened. Sophia had uncovered a pattern of suspicious rulings spanning decades, all seemingly designed to protect certain individuals and businesses from scrutiny. But more than that, she had found evidence linking these cases directly to the ritual sites they had been investigating. "This is it," Olivia breathed, her mind racing. "This is how they've been maintaining their power all these years. They're not just using the rituals for some mystical purpose. They're using the energy to manipulate events, to ensure outcomes in their favor." The implications were staggering. If they were right, it meant that the Inner Circle's influence extended far beyond what they had initially believed. It wasn't just about power and control. It was about reshaping reality itself to suit their needs. As they shared their findings with the rest of the team, a sense of urgency settled over the group. They knew they had to act fast before the Inner Circle could regroup and cover their tracks. Over the next few days, Olivia and her team worked around the clock, piecing together the final strands of evidence they needed to bring the entire operation crashing down. It was exhausting, grueling work, but there was an energy in the air, a sense that they were on the cusp of something monumental. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of sleepless nights and caffeine-fueled breakthroughs, they were ready to make their move. The raid was planned with meticulous care. Multiple teams would strike simultaneously across the city, targeting key members of the Inner Circle and securing crucial evidence. Olivia, along with Marcus, an especially selected tactical unit, would lead the assault on what they believed to be the Inner Circle's primary ritual site, a sprawling underground complex beneath an abandoned industrial park. As they geared up for the operation, Olivia felt a mix of emotions churning within her. Excitement, fear, determination, all warred for dominance as she checked her weapon one last time. Her grandfather approached, his face etched with concern. "Liv," he said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know I can't talk you out of leading this raid, but please, be careful. We've come too far to lose you now." Olivia nodded, covering his hand with her own. "I will, Grandpa. I promise." As the teams moved into position, the night air was thick with tension. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as she gave the signal to begin the operation. What followed was a blur of action and adrenaline. The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood filled the air as teams breached their targets across the city. Over the radio, Olivia heard a steady stream of updates: suspects apprehended, evidence secured, years of careful planning by the Inner Circle unraveling in a matter of minutes. But it was at the primary ritual site that they met the fiercest resistance. As Olivia and her team descended into the underground complex, they were met with a hail of gunfire. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, making the hair on the back of Olivia's neck stand on end. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of robed figures attempting to complete some kind of ritual, their chants rising above the sound of combat. At the center of it all stood a figure she recognized, one of Blackwood's closest associates, a man who had managed to evade capture during the clock tower incident. With Marcus covering her, Olivia fought her way towards the central chamber. The air grew thicker, heavier, as if reality itself was bending under the strain of whatever forces were being invoked. As she burst into the chamber, time seemed to slow. The robed figure turned, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and manic determination. In his hands, he held an object that pulsed with an eerie light, the culmination of centuries of the Inner Circle's dark ambitions. "It's over," Olivia called out, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Put it down, now." For a moment, it seemed as if he might comply. But then, with a cry of desperation, he raised the object above his head. What happened next would be debated for years to come. Some would say it was simply an explosion, a result of whatever volatile elements the inner circle had been working with. Others, those who had been there, would speak in hushed tones of reality itself seeming to fracture, of glimpses into realms beyond human comprehension. All Olivia knew was that one moment she was facing down the last vestiges of the inner circle's power, and the next she was being thrown backward by a wave of energy that defied description. When she came to, the world around her was eerily silent. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of ozone. As her vision cleared, she saw Marcus kneeling beside her, his face etched with concern. Did we do it?" she managed to croak out. Marcus nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. "Yeah, Liv, we did it. It's over." As they emerged from the underground complex, battered but victorious, Olivia was struck by the scene before her. The night sky was lightening with the first hints of dawn, casting a surreal glow over the city. In the distance, she could see other teams converging, escorting handcuffed suspects and carrying boxes of evidence. The scale of what they had accomplished was only just beginning to sink in. Over the next few weeks, as the dust settled and the full extent of the inner circle's operations came to light, Oakwood found itself grappling with its new reality. There were trials, of course, long, complex affairs that laid bare decades of corruption and manipulation. But there was also a sense of renewal, of a city finally free from the shadow that had loomed over it for so long. For Olivia, the end of the investigation brought a mix of emotions. There was pride in what they had accomplished, relief that it was finally over, but also a sense of loss. For so long, her life had been defined by this case, by the legacy of her grandparents and the secrets of the past. It was on a quiet evening, as she sat with her grandfather on the porch of his old house, that she finally gave voice to the thoughts that had been swirling in her mind. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice soft in the gathering twilight. "After everything that's happened, how do we just go back to normal?" James Reeves was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he spoke, his voice was filled with a quiet wisdom. "We don't go back, Liv. We go forward. What we've done here, it's not an ending. It's a beginning. Oakwood has a chance now, a chance to heal, to grow, to become something better than it was before. And we have a responsibility to see that through." Olivia nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. He was right, of course. The work wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt a sense of hope for the future. As the last light of day faded from the sky, Olivia Reeves looked out over the city she had fought so hard to save. Oakwood wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But it was free from the insidious influence that had shaped it for so long. And with that freedom came endless possibilities. The Timekeeper's reign was over. The cycles of violence and secrets that had defined Oakwood for generations were broken. And in their place, a new era was dawning, one of truth, justice, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As Olivia sat there, surrounded by the gentle sounds of a city at peace, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for her team, for her family, and for the chance to be part of something truly meaningful. The road ahead would have its challenges, but she was ready to face them. After all, time was on their side now, and the future, at last, was theirs to shape. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!